left it up to us.
I mean, it's an amazing specimen. You look at this. You can say it's Good evening, board members and residents. I'd like to call to order our regular board meeting for Monday, April 22nd, 2013. Will everyone please rise for the Pledge of Allegiance? I pledge allegiance to the flag
of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Mr. Witt, will you please take the roll call?
Yes, Mr. Brado?
Here.
Mr. Capral?
Here.
Mr. Swikowski?
Here.
Mr. Tominello?
Here.
Mr. York has asked to be excused. Mr. Witt, here. Mr. Verkust?
Here, thank you. Next on the agenda is the approval of the consent agenda with the approval of the regular board meeting minutes of April 8, 2013. Approval of the bills in the amount of $545,780.88. Approval of the March 2013 Revenue and Expenditures Report. Approval of temporary road closing at Jefferson Avenue and Metro Parkway for the Run Like a Mother event to be held on Saturday, May 11th from 10:30 a.m. until 12:30 noon. To concur with the emergency repairs to the SCADA system in the amount of $5,000.
Mr. Supervisor, I'll make a motion to approve the consent agenda with the bills in the amount of $545,780.88.
Support. We've got a motion by Mr. Tominello with support by Mr. Swikowski to approve the consent agenda as presented. Any discussion? Hearing none and seeing no public comment, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, motion carries. Next is the approval of the regular agenda. Board members, we had two proposed revisions to the agenda. One is the approval to transfer ownership of an escrowed liquor license regarding the Lake Breeze property. That was proposed as item C2 on the agenda. Second is the interview committee has brought back a proposed hire for the ordinance officer position. We'd like to propose discussion regarding that as item D2. Is there a motion?
So moved.
Have a motion by Mr. Brado. Support?
Support.
Support by Mr. Swikowski. Discussion? Hearing none and seeing no public comment, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, motion carries. Next on the agenda would be announcements. We've got a few announcements here. The Harrison Township Library will be hosting multiple events through April. Cooking with Herbs will be tomorrow, which is Tuesday, April 23rd, from 6 until 7 p.m. Gourmet Garden Hour will be coordinating the event. I'm thinking getting Herb and Gordon mixed up here. Tales with Tales will be held on Saturday, April 27th from 11 a.m. to 12:15 p.m. Each child there will get 15 minutes to read with Patty, a therapy dog. Pre-registration is required. All children must be accompanied by an adult. Also this Saturday, April 27th, is the Let's Move Festival of Races, including the half marathon, which is predominantly run through our township. You can refer to their website, www.letsmovefestival.com, for information. This marathon is our third year, and it does result in some temporary road closures Saturday. Eastbound South River from Avery to Jefferson will be closed from 7 a.m. to 1 p.m. And southbound Jefferson from South River to Tucker will be closed from 7 a.m. to 1 p.m. I know that portions of South River opened well before 1 p.m. and the later part of the stretch of that course opened a little bit later. They run in from Mount Clemens down South River, and then they exit the township along the bike path on the spillway. So same route as last year. The Harrison Township Parks and Recreation Committee will be hosting the Run Like a Mother race. This event will take place on May 11th at Lake St. Clair Metro Park. It begins at Prentice Point Apartments. Participants can take part in a 1-mile fun walk with Tootsie the Clown, Zumba with Danny, and 5K and 10K races timed by the Hanson's Race Management Team. All ages are welcome. The race also has a need for volunteers on Tuesday, May 7th, Friday, May 10th, and Saturday, May 11th. For more information on the race and volunteer opportunities, please visit the township website or call the supervisor's office, 586-466-1445. The Harrison Township Beautification Commission will be having a replant 2013 of the Veterans Garden. If interested in volunteering or donating to this project, please contact the Township Supervisor's Office, 586-466-1445. The week of May 13th, the Beautification Commission will begin the project. The Nautical Coast Cleanup, sponsored by the Harrison Township Environmental Committee, will be held on Saturday, May 18th and Sunday, May 19th. Cleanup locations will include Waterfront Park, Spillway and Tucker Park, the Water Plant Bay, the Mount Clemens Water Plant, Riviera Street Bay, Metro Beach Day Sail Ramp area, and the Harley Ensign site. Entertainment will be provided at Waterfront Park by the Riverboat Ramblers. For more information, again, you can visit the township website. And for information regarding pre-registration, you can call 586-469-4848. We also have the chairperson for the Harrison Township Historical Commission to make a presentation.
My name is Linda Karczewski from Harrison Township Historic Commission. We'd like to invite the board and the citizens of the township to come on Saturday, June 8th, from 1 to 4 p.m. for our open house. Ribbon cutting ceremony will be at 1 p.m. and we'll have refreshments there. Won't take you that long. It's a very small building, but we're proud of it. Took us a number of years to get it ready. So we'd like to invite everybody in the township. We're gonna have it in the paper, and if you put it on your website for us, we'd appreciate that. And if anybody has any questions, they can call me at 586-463-1754. Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Is this a time when you made an announcement to ask you something? When you said this Saturday, you're gonna close Jefferson, what happens to the people on those streets? Like, where I live, it's
I
a
can
dead-end
address
street.
that, yep.
We have no way of getting out.
Yep, we aren't closing Jefferson, but one lane of Jefferson is closed. So folks are able to leave the road, but let's just say, for example, that you get to,
It's
the
gonna
end-
be Ballard or Compo Lane.
I'm gonna help you out.
Oh, okay.
Okay? If you get to the end of your road and it's Jefferson, and you want to make a right turn, and that lane is closed, you have to make a left, but you can go down to the next road and continue on your way. The Sheriff's Department has worked with the Department of Roads and the township. There's an alternate route to get anywhere in the township. And the first year, some of the detours put some folks into some tight spots. We had some complaints from residents. We worked pretty hard with the Sheriff's Department and the Department of Roads last year. The detours last year, we didn't have, but a couple of minor complaints. There really weren't any traffic backups. The majority of the runners are off of this course pretty early. But based on the fact that there are some folks that might not be able to complete a half marathon in a really aggressive time, there's a couple of folks that might walk toward the end of the race. But the space between the runners is such that you don't have a problem getting out of your road. But let's say, for example, again, you were at Crocker and Jefferson, and you wanted to make a right there. They're going to detour you to the left, and you can, say, go back on Lance Cruz, back out to Metro Parkway, and come in through another way. You might have to go further down to Shook and come back to get to your road. But the sheriff's deputies and the reserve officers will be placed at every intersection to direct the traffic.
Okay, that I wasn't worried about. It was just that Compo Lane and Ballard, there is no way out. This is it. We
Jefferson.
have to go right to Jefferson.
And they will let you out on Jefferson.
Okay,
Yep,
that's what I was.
Yeah, Jefferson isn't closed.
When you said that, I'm thinking, Wait a minute, we have no other way of getting out.
Absolutely, yep. Some roads are more problematic than others, like you say, for example, folks that might be in the center of the township. Say if you live on Lance Cruz between Jefferson and Metro Parkway, well, you can go out Metro Parkway
Right.
instead of Jefferson.
Right.
But
We can't.
But yeah, there are certainly some roads that are dead-ended. The Point Rosa subdivision is one of those, but there are detours set up for everyone.
Okay, that's what I just wanted to make sure that we could get out, either that or I had to get out before everybody else started running.
Yep, that's right.
All right, thank you.
Thank you. All right, next on our agenda is item B1, appointments. Board members, we've received an application for reappointment for Mr. James Keene for the Environmental Committee. Mr. Keene has served on both the Beautification Commission and the Environmental Committee for some time. I believe his passion for the environment and the community would be an asset for the Environmental Committee. I would like to recommend the reappointment, actually, of Mr. Keene to the Environmental Committee for a 3-year term to expire April 22nd, 2016.
Make a motion to reappoint Mr. James Keene to the Environmental Committee for a 3-year term to expire April 22, 2016.
Is there support? Support. We've got a motion by Mr. Tominello, a support by Mr. Caprell for the reappointment. Is there any discussion? Hearing none and seeing no public comment, all those in favor, please signify by saying aye. Aye. Those opposed? Motion carries. Thank you, Board. We're fortunate to have Mr. Keene on both committees. Hard worker. Next on our agenda is item B2, also an appointment. The office has received an application for appointment from Mr. Wayne Babish for the Economic Development Corporation. Mr. Babish has been a long-standing business owner, and his experience would be an asset for the EDC. I'd like to recommend the appointment of Mr. Wayne Babish to the Economic Development Corporation for the remainder of a 6-year term to expire June 20, 2018.
Mr. Chairman, move to appoint Mr. Wayne Babish to the Economic Development Corporation for the remainder of a 6-year term to expire June 20th, 2018.
Support.
Got a motion by Mr. Switkowski with support by Mr. Brado. Is there any discussion on the motion? Hearing none and seeing no public comment, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? Motion carries. Thank you, Board. Next on the agenda is item C1. Mr. Witt?
Yeah, the senior account bookkeeper in the accounting department is retiring at the end of June. So Mr. Spencer and I had been discussing that there possibly will be some internal candidates. So we'd like to begin this internal posting process so that we can possibly have an opportunity for some training before this individual leaves. The person leaving is a wealth of information, and I'd hate to lose it before we find our replacement. So we're just asking at this time to post internally, and if we don't receive any applicants, then we'll go out and advertise and follow the similar, advertising and interviewing process that we have for other positions. And in the end, a recommendation will be brought back to the board at a later date.
The position, there's an indication that there may be some internal applicants, but until we go through this process, we don't know, and I think if we wait too long, we could lose some of that knowledge. This is a payroll and accounting position, pretty important.
Mr. Supervisor, I'll make a motion to post, advertise, and interview for the position of senior account bookkeeper in the accounting department with a recommendation be brought back to the board at a later date.
Is there support?
Support.
Support. We've got a motion by Mr. Tominello, with support by Mr. Switkowski. Is there any discussion? Hearing none and seeing no public comment, all those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Those opposed? Motion carries. Thank you.
Thank you, board.
Next on our agenda, item C2, Mr. Witt.
Yeah, we received a request to transfer ownership of a escrowed STD and STM liquor license for 36531 Jefferson, which is the Lake Breeze Party Store, with a Sunday sales permit for the PM and a new Sunday sales permit for the AM. All inspections have been completed as far as plumbing, electrical, building. Fire has gone through and completed that. The sheriff's department has completed the background check. Everything's in order. Tax bills, water bills nothing is past due. The owner had asked if we add it today, so they plan on having the Liquor Control Commission out as soon as they get their stock in, and they didn't want to have any delay. So they've done a great job of fixing up the building, so I thought it made sense to bring it forward today.
And again, there is a concern that our next meeting is 3 weeks away, so we wanted to try to keep this business owner moving toward getting open and servicing residents and, you know.
Voting season's gonna be starting up pretty
Yeah,
soon.
yeah.
Anyway, I guess I'll offer that as a motion to recommend approval to transfer ownership of an escrow 2011 SDD and SDM license to Ozog Incorporated from Ozog Incorporated to Lake Breeze Investments Incorporated, located at 6531 Jefferson, Harrison Township, Michigan, 48045.
Support.
Got a motion from Mr. Witt with support from Mr. Brado. Is there discussion on the motion? Hearing none and seeing no public comment, is there a roll call vote
Yes,
required?
there is.
Thank you.
Mr. Witt, yes. Mr. Brado,
Yes.
Mr. Capral,
Yes.
Mr. Swakowski,
Yes.
Mr. Tominello.
Yes.
Mr. York is excused. Mr. Verkest.
Yes.
Motion carries.
Excellent. Thank you. Next on our agenda, item D1. Board members, you may recall at a previous board meeting, we discussed the issue of roads in the township. The township agreed to form a subcommittee. The subcommittee met with our engineer from Wade Trim to discuss the contents of a potential new updated study of our roads, the local roads in specific. It was determined that the new study should have two outcomes. One, a recommendation on what roadway improvements, if any, the township would include in a program. Two, a recommendation from the subcommittee on how the roadway program, if any, should be funded. A four-part scope of work was identified to achieve these outcomes. Mr. Newmer had basically summarized that plan in a letter dated April 11th. And one of the issues that we had, the last time we took this up, was the cost to do the study. He had given us, he said, depending on what the direction of that subcommittee might be, the costs could range from $5,000 to $10,000. At this point, he's narrowed down the cost on a figure not to exceed $8,000 for us to be able to basically put our arms around the condition of the local roads in the township, to try to establish what the process might be, what the cost might be, and then further to go forward and determine if there's any potential for looking at funding internally, if SADs are the best process, if nothing is the right thing to do. But with the interest that we're seeing from residents in addressing the roads in their local neighborhoods and potential for SADs, we see it as a value to be able to establish just, what's the best way to go about it. So we were hoping, the subcommittee was, that the board might be willing to approve the expense of up to a figure not to exceed $8,000 on the engineering services with Wade Trim to create an updated road study. Is there any discussion? Or is there a motion? Oh, go ahead.
Just one thing, Mr. Chairman.
Yep.
On the subject of roads, last week, the Transportation Improvement Program of SEMCOG, the Development Committee, came through with 35 recommendations that they added for the fiscal year 2011 to 2014, and that's in accordance with the Regional Transportation Plan, the federal mandates. They added 35, and they deleted 9. Some of the deletions were local roads in Macomb County in favor of the bridge over the spillway at Metro Parkway and Metro Parkway from the spillway to Gratiot, like road maintenance. So there was money there. So most of the road projects, as far as local roads that the county have been sidelined for other projects. There was money, like $45 million for CMAQ, which is, congestion mitigation and air quality, that there's gonna be a number, I think 6 or 7 projects throughout the county where they're gonna be, instituting traffic signal control and that to eliminate that. But, you know, some of those are in a construction phase and some of those are in preliminary engineering. But for the most part, if you look at it, anything that's gonna be done, it might be done, like some of the projects in the county, maybe 12 Mile Road in East, you know, in Mound. There was some work in East Point. So there's a number of projects that'll be going on, but as far as local roads, you're not gonna see any federal money through the county for anything. So if we're gonna do anything with roads, it's gonna be on our own.
Right. So, recently, there's a Macomb chapter of the Michigan Townships Association. We'd met last Friday, and we'd arranged to have representatives from the Department of Roads. Actually, Mr. Hoffner is the chief engineer and the head of that department. We had representatives from MDOT, and, doggone it, I know there was someone else there, but a group of folks all kind of given a different perspective on the issue of roads. We talked about, because it's township-based, we talked about, you know, the issues that maybe Ray Township and Lennox Township may have are completely different to some of the roads that maybe some of the more southern townships have. But in either case, Mr. Hoffner spoke a little bit to how funding for roads works. So very interesting statistics. I think it was 19 cents per gallon of gas. It was either 17 or 9. I think it was 19 cents. It was 19 cents per gallon is charged, returned to the state. That's the same physical amount of money. It's a fixed dollar amount, 19 cents, since 1997. It has not been increased since then. He said, though, due to the efficiencies of vehicles, there are actually less gallons of gas consumed, so the actual dollars in 1997 that were collected are physically greater than they are now. Number two, the cost of practically everything's gone up. I know he said it was, there was a figure of a $20 per unit. I don't remember what that was for, I thought it was asphalt. It went from $20 to $48. Maybe it was per ton. I don't remember the exact, but the point is that the cost of the raw materials in most cases have more than doubled. Certainly the cost of fuel, the cost of labor, the cost of health care, everything's gone up since 1997, but the actual dollars that are being returned have gone down. Another interesting fact that he told us, and that's relative to Public Act 51, and that's the state law that dictates or addresses road funding. Another thing that he pointed out was that according to Public Act 51, the county is prohibited from spending any money on any local road that doesn't come with at least a 50% match from the local funding unit. Now, in the event that the state does readdress gas taxes and road funding, and certainly there's been a lot of talk in Lansing, the potential exists at that time that more dollars could be made available for local road funding. But at this point, the county has no program to fund for local roads, and they haven't for many years. But if they were to have some funding model, it would require, by law today, it would require at least a 50% match from the local municipalities. One way or another, if our road in front of our home is gonna be repaved, there is no magical bucket of money to pay for it. So, one way or another, it's a responsibility that does fall on the citizens, and it falls generally on the citizens in the community in which you live. At this point, I'm not advocating that we should adopt a plan, but I'm saying that in the event that there is another funding model, or there is enough interest on the part of our residents and our residents of Harrison Township, there is enough of an interest to do something on a broader scale. At this point, we don't know what the cost is, we don't know what the value is, we don't know what the return on investment is. And in the absence of that, I feel like we're deficient as leaders of the township. Nothing that we do is going to result in a millage or a special assessment district. Any funding opportunity has to be approved by the voters. But with the interest that we're seeing, increasingly we're asked about what options is the township considering. Other townships, other cities, other communities have enacted road millages. or taken on other kinds of funding for road projects. I'm not saying we should or shouldn't do it, but we should have an idea if it's a half a mil or 10 mils. But right now, we frankly don't know. And you know, cities have city engineers and, you know, public works departments, we don't have that. What we've got is we've got a contracted relationship with our engineer. If we were a city, I think we'd go to our engineering department and say, hey, guys, you're gonna have to tell us where our road's at. Unfortunately, we don't have that. If we wanna find out that information, we've gotta make an arrangement with our contractor, which is the most efficient way to do it. And I'm saying that I believe there's value in this board knowing, having a better handle on the condition of our roads and the cost to improve the roads. And from there, you know, we can choose to act or not act. We can propose something to the voters, or we can, might decide that, or find that the cost is prohibitive at this point.
Mr. Supervisor, I'll make a motion to authorize that the committee spend up to $8,000 on engineering services with the Wade Trim as needed to create an updated road study.
All right? Got a motion by Mr. Brado. Is there support?
Support.
Support by Mr. Caprell. Discussion, board members? Hearing none, we'll open up the floor for public comment.
Bill Serville, resident. A few questions. First off, is this going to encompass all public roads, no matter what the paving is right now? If it's dirt, if it's asphalt, if it's concrete? My next question is, what are you going to get for the $8,000? We have mile upon mile of roads. I really don't understand what Mr. Newmer can do for $8,000. As far as cost, it was talked before that costs do change constantly. But whatever mechanism is used to pay for a paving project, it's gonna have to be reevaluated at that time to see how much it's gonna cost. I think the $8,000 would be better spent putting that $8,000 towards a master drainage plan, because it's foolhardy to put any money into paving any of the roads without taking care of the drainage first. Thank you.
Thank you. Seeing no other public comment, we'll close the floor for public comment and move back to board comment. Some of the answers I think I can supply, and some I'm going to ask Mr. Newmer for some direction on. The question is, will it encompass all public roads? Yes. What we talked about was that, as a matter of fact, there was some discussion within our subcommittee meeting in conversation with Mr. Newmer. How do we deal with public roads? How do we deal with private roads? How do we deal with dirt roads and the roads that have already been improved, and practically every road? We've got to have an idea of all the roads in the township. The suggestion was made that we might want to try to categorize. We don't have 500 kinds of roads in the township. We can group them into a handful of different varieties of roads. Like you mentioned, there's dirt, there's asphalt, there's concrete. Again, one of the variables we had, I know we talked about private versus public roads and how that impacts it, and how we would look at that. Is there a legal requirement not to be involved in a private road, or is there a requirement that we would if there was a millage? A lot of these problems have probably been solved already by other communities, but there's certainly things that we need to make sure that we're educated about. Cost change, absolutely. I know that was a statement you made, but we agree. Right now, we have no baseline, but absolutely. A master drainage plan, certainly we see that when we've looked at some of the SADs, improvements to roads, residents will come in. Generally, what happens is this, and we've had conversations with the county. Residents are upset about their roads. They call the county and they say, my road's falling apart, what are you gonna do about it? The county says, nothing. We haven't done a local road in 25 years, or whatever that number is. And they make it clear to the resident that they will not come in and repave a local road. So they say, well, what can we do? They say, well, you can form an SAD. So they call our clerk, which is the person who handles the SADs. They say, how do we go about forming an SAD? They set up that process. We go to Mr. Newmer, and we ask Mr. Newmer, well, what's it gonna cost to repave? Well, heck, if you wanna just go through, grind it, and relay a thing on top, it's only gonna cost this much. And folks say, well, that's great. We say, but that's really not what we want you to do. Well, what do you want us to do? Well, we've got to address infrastructure underneath, and while that cost may be borne by the water and sewer department, we also believe there's a need to address drainage. So then we go back to Mr. Newmer and we say, well, what happens if we address drainage, we do the infrastructure improvements, and then we rebuild the road? Well, now that cost comes back to be something significantly higher. Part of the problem in that is folks in one community might say, you know, I don't think we have a big drainage problem. Folks in another community say we have a significant drainage problem. That's the drainage of the roads is one of the things we've got to take a look at in the study and quantify it for certain. It's an investment. And the way Mr. Hoffner explained it, I feel like best, was he could come down practically any road and put a minimal investment in it, and he'd improve the road. But would the road be back in a poor shape in 5 years? All right, what's the cost to do something real significant? Well, it might get you 25 years down the road, but folks might not want to pay at this time. At this point, we don't have that idea of where the sweet spot is or what the duration of road improvements are for our township and what those drainage costs are. Mr. Newmer, one of the questions, what are we gonna get? Why should we give you $8,000? What are you gonna come to a couple meetings or what?
Yeah, good question. That's what we put together in our proposal letter. We did meet with the subcommittee and talk, actually at length.
Is your microphone on?
Yes, it
Okay.
is. I'll use two. Maybe that'll help.
There you go, stereo.
All right. Can you hear me now? All right. We did meet with the subcommittee and talked through, had a lengthy discussion, actually, and talked about a lot of the different factors that would go into a road program, what we might look at, what we might consider. Like you said, we talked about the different categories of roads. We talked about different types of roads that this might apply to. We also talked about what kind of fixes or what kind of rehabilitation strategies you might look at. You can look at doing things like preventative maintenance first to keep the good roads in good shape, but that tends to allow the roads that are failing to continue to fail. You can look at fixing the worst roads first, which is nice to go through and get those bad ones out of the way. That tends to be a very, very expensive program because you're spending a lot of money up front. Meanwhile, your roads that are good continue to deteriorate. We might want to look at some kind of a balanced program where you do some preventative maintenance to maintain your investment while you do some reconstruction to address roads that are failing. The township may want to take a different spin on this altogether and say, you know what, we just want to adopt some kind of a funding mechanism, whatever that might be, in order to have some money available for the local road match, like you mentioned, if the county comes up with a program. There are also programs where you can get money through the Federal Aid Committee to do roads, but those require an 18%, 18.15% actually, local match on federal monies, and those can only be used on roads that are on the federal state highway program. So those would be your major roads like Jefferson, Crocker, North River Road, South River Road, those types of roads. So you may say, well, we just want to set up a funding source so we have matching monies so we can take advantage of these federal opportunities that come up. There's lots of different levels of investment that you may want to look at. You may also look at it and say, you know what, this isn't really our business. After looking at it, we've decided this isn't something we should do. We'll continue to let the residents fund the roads through the SID process like we currently have it. So there's lots of different things to consider there, and we talked, we scratched the surface with some of those issues with the subcommittee, but they wanted to go into more detail, look at some of the pros and cons, kind of weigh those factors out and determine what might be the best way to go about doing that. We also looked at different types of funding that might be used were you to go ahead with the program. General fund money is always available, that's an option. You can look at special assessments, you can look at trying to capture some of those federal roadway monies, you can look at millages, or you may want to look at combinations of these things. Maybe you say, we'll collect a millage, or we'll collect some money, and then when a special assessment district comes in, we'll kick in 20% or so, or 30% towards the cost of the drainage, because that's a cost the residents don't typically want to cover. There's lots of things to consider, lots of options to look at, and that's what our study proposes to do. Look at those things, identify the costs, go through, identify the different factors that we have to look at, and then to put some recommendations together.
Okay.
So that's what you're getting for your
Yep.
$8,000.
So what are you gonna do? It sounds like you're gonna do, some of that is gonna be labor on recategorizing the roads, kind of putting them in various groups, looking at some of the engineering options, or I should say, construction options, associated costs, some of those proposals. So the cost that you're doing is kind of a supportive role in you and your associates providing some of that labor.
Yes.
Okay. So the $8,000 would be primarily engineering money spent, some in the field we discussed, I know, and some would be kind of on a estimated base or, you know, construction advice, that sort of thing.
Yes.
Okay. And then there was an optional cost for a map. I know that was one of the things that you'd put in there.
Yeah, we had some discussion at the subcommittee level. At some point in time, if you do move ahead with the program, whatever the program might look like, you'll probably want to put together some kind of a map or a visual that's easy for people to look at and see what kind of roads there are, what you're proposing to do with them, and how you're proposing to pay for them. There was some discussion at the subcommittee level of whether it's appropriate to do that at this point, to help the board and the residents understand what we're proposing in the study, or if maybe that might be a step that would better fit later on. And we decided that we would kind of separate that piece of work out and give you a price for that separately. And then you could decide, kind of as we went through the study, if you said, you know, Dave, it really makes sense to do that now, or, you know, maybe we want to wait and do that later. So
Right.
that's a separate cost.
And as I interpreted that additional service, there's no breaking point. In other words, if we complete this and we say, wow, we like what we've seen, and we want to go further, and we want to, you know, in other words, the result of this study is at some point in the process, we might decide, you know, this just is cost prohibitive or unrealistic. It's too big of a problem for this agency to address. But in the event that we were to find something, and at some point we were to decide that we want that map, there's really no point at which that cost drops off. We're not beholden to make that decision today.
Nope.
Okay. So a couple of answers to the public comments. Any further discussion?
Just one thing, you know, and getting in with the roads in like 2012, you know, the Southeast program had $558 million in projects and 883 miles of road preservation is where the most of it. And there was only 7 miles of lanes, new roads added out of that. And a lot of it too, there was 93 bridges repaired, and those were mainly MDOT over the freeways. Because anytime they repair the freeway, they have to repair the bridge. So, but, you know, the majority of money on the federal level that is coming in is going just on preservation.
Yep, absolutely.
Mr. Supervisor, is this also going to include the rebuilding of bridges that are targeted in the township as well?
Yeah, so certainly, as this board knows, there is currently a federal program. It's a 95-5 match, where literally the federal government in the program provides 95% of the costs of construction, and the local units are responsible for only 5%. With that program, the local unit is responsible for the cost of engineering and the cost of easement acquisition. Through that program, Macomb County, basically the Department of Roads, formerly the Road Commission when the program started, went through, assessed all the bridges in the town, in the county, and identified those critical parts of our infrastructure. They narrowed that down, they've addressed the majority of them. The last bridges within that program on public roads that are in need of rehabilitation are in Harrison Township, primarily throughout the Huron Point subdivision. A couple of them have been identified. You may recall I'd approached the board earlier with the question, would we want to participate? Of the 5% match and the cost of engineering, the county is willing to further split that cost with us. So technically, to address those bridges, we're looking at 2.5% of construction costs and 50% of engineering costs. So it's certainly a very attractive thing, but that still amounts to, I think the estimates that I'd seen are very preliminary at this point, because I don't think they've done the actual work, but based on other similar bridges, they're in excess of $100,000 per bridge. And again, really, we have no active funding mechanism. So, you know, having a match fund available to do that would certainly be a part of this. So I guess the short answer is yes, but there has been some, you know, thought put to that even independent of this.
Okay.
If there's $1 million bridge we can build for $100,000, I wouldn't want to say no to it, you know.
Okay, thank you.
Yep. Any other discussion, questions? Hearing none, we've got a motion by Mr. Brado with support by Mr. Caprell to authorize that the Road Subcommittee spend up to $8,000 on engineering services with Wade Trim as needed to create an updated road study. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, motion carries. Thank you, Board. Next on our agenda is item D2. Board members, as you recall, I don't know, I don't have the specific board meeting, but several board meetings ago, we discussed the retirement of our ordinance officer and the need to go out and post first internally as well as outside if necessary, which proved to be the case, to locate a hire for the ordinance officer position. At some point later in that process, a suggestion was made, and this board agreed with the decision to change that from an ordinance officer licensing to a building inspector licensing. It was discussed that the primary goal of this person would still be ordinance enforcement, but with approximately $2,000 per year of additional wages, we'd have a person who would be able to fill in the event that one of our building inspectors were to be absent or there was a surge in the work. And even as it pertains to sometimes some of the work in the office, when residents come in with questions, we'd have that additional knowledge base. So this board supported that. We went through a posting, advertising, interviewing process. We had 6 candidates that met the criteria as it pertained to licensing. One proved not to be interested initially and didn't respond. They submitted an application. One later changed their mind and chose not to apply for the job, which narrowed it down to 4 candidates. We interviewed those 4 candidates. The committee was the 3 full-timers, Mr. York, Mr. Witt, and myself. And of course, Mr. Parak was in on that interview process. We went through that process, and in addition to that, we were afforded a couple of luxuries where by chance Mr. Parak happened to be at a training session. The Southeastern Michigan Building Industry Association, I forget exactly what the acronym is, it's SEMBOYA. Basically, it's building officials, inspectors, and so forth. They have ongoing continuing education classes. Mr. Parak happened to be at one of those, asked about some of the candidates, and found one of them came with definitely some very high recommendations. We discussed it, and the committee of the 4 of us agreed unanimously that Mr. Steven Sternicki was the best candidate for the job. So the recommendation from that committee would be to extend the offer to Mr. Sternicki. I talked to Mr. Sternicki. He would be able, he had previously made arrangements so that he wouldn't be available until Monday, the 29th, but he said he would be available whether for hire or to begin the process. Of course, there's a drug test and health, physical. His recommendations came back good. He seems to be qualified for the job. And most importantly, it's important that this board remembers that although we try to be thorough in the interview process, the contract does allow for a 5-month probationary period, and it's during that time that we're most likely to see if this is the guy we want to keep or not. But every indication at this point is that he's the right man for the job. Mr. Parak is anxious to get the person in position. So as a result, as recently as Friday, we determined that this was the guy for the job that we would like to recommend. If we don't act today, we've got 3 weeks we'd have to wait before we could bring this recommendation to the board. So it's for that reason that we wanted to add that to the agenda this evening.
I'd make a motion to hire Steven Sternicki to fill the position of building inspector in the building department, subject to a physical drug test and 90-day probationary period as recommended, with a start level salary. Do you know
I know it's in the 40. I don't have the exact
Yeah.
number. I could look at it.
It's a start level though.
It's the beginning salary.
Yeah.
It's established in the contract. It's approximately $45,000.
I'll support that.
Got a motion by Mr. Witt with support by Mr. Tominello. Is there discussion, board members?
Sure. So the problem I had, and I know we all talked about this, and we were trying to leverage skill sets of specific people to try to do multiple jobs. My question though is, this is replacing a full-time ordinance officer. How maybe you can explain to me real quick, and how often is the primary duties of this employee going to be tied to ordinance enforcement? Let me go on to say, I think our ordinance enforcement is lacking.
Agreed.
I think we have a lot of violations that continue. I think we don't do a good job in ordinance enforcement. And I don't think we're fair across the board when we don't govern our ordinance officers and the way we administer ordinance violations, we're not being fair to all the residents of the township.
And property owners, agreed.
So I guess my question is how, and in what schedule, or how are you going to make sure that we at least get a full-time ordinance role out of this job before, it sort of reverts, or before this person utilizes his skill set as a building code enforcement or inspector? So I guess I
Yep.
need to understand how that's gonna happen.
Yep, great questions. So first and foremost, I agree with you on all the counts relative to ordinance enforcement. And I'm pretty confident I can speak for the committee, meaning the four of us that went through this process. If there was one thing that we stressed internally, it was that the personality of this person is definitely a key part of this person being efficient at the job that we give to them. And again, that's why I say, I think the reason why, at least through the interview process, we're excited is because this person comes to us with a lot of very positive recommendations relative to ordinance enforcement. So we're saying that a key part of ordinance enforcement is having ordinance enforcement officers with the appropriate skill set and, to do the job. We believe this candidate brings that. Second of all, we're looking specifically, in this case, at someone with additional licensing requirements. That was a part of the application process. When we did that, we made it clear to every applicant that the primary goal of this job is ordinance enforcement. So we don't want someone coming in saying, well, I'll start there, but eventually my goal is to do something else within the township. So definitely very thorough in terms of that explanation, and again, supporting that need. But to answer your question, it's very simple. We had an ordinance officer. We did not have that ordinance officer doing anything other than ordinance enforcement in the past. We believe that this person, with the experience they have, we believe that they're going to be, a good hire. What percent are they going to be doing? As much as we can give them. The only and there's nothing saying that we can't on occasion employ temporary. It's certainly acceptable within our contract to bring in temporary people from time to time, which we have for plumbing and mechanical, electrical, and building inspectors to keep up with the demand. Right now, our demand is very high in those inspections, and we're struggling keeping up. We may get to a point where this board may want to look at another position, but it wouldn't be taking this person or eliminating the ordinance officer. One of the problems that our building official pointed out through the interview process is that some of the time that he spends at the counter working with residents or resolving issues takes him away from some of the work that he would be able to do. And we'd indicated that we thought some of the value is to have somebody where, if you set up that schedule and you say, all right, I want you to be out in the field at this particular time addressing ordinance enforcement, perhaps there's some time involved back in the office where you might be writing up things or addressing paperwork relative to court appearances and so forth. The suggestion was made to Mr. Parak that he might want to schedule this new person's time so that the time that they are in the office, they would be available to step up to the counter. So if someone does have a question about a fence or a shed, they'd be in a position where they'd be able to counsel. So some of the value in hiring someone with that building inspector's license isn't necessarily just to have them potentially do building inspections, but to have the knowledge base available to be able to assist the ladies in the office and residents and contractors that might come in with questions relative to the building code. It was clear to us that this individual was very knowledgeable about the building code. So how much are they going to be doing in ordinance enforcement? 99%, 100% if we can help it. But if we have a situation where there is an emergency or we have a need, we see the value in, for approximately $2,000 more in annual salary, to have them available to fill that alternate role. But it's an ordinance position, And I think the board agrees with you. I know the committee of four that did the interview process agree that ordinance enforcement within our township needs to be improved.
So then another question I would have, was there any discussion or any expectations set relative to possibly doing code enforcement on Saturdays? You know, I know we have that flexibility, and I think that's a dire need, because that's typically when we have a lot of violators on the weekend. So was that discussed in the interview? Is that gonna be expected of the employee?
It's an option available within the contract, so it's something we can do. We didn't make it a part of the interview process at this point. So we didn't say to folks, well, we want to make sure that you will or will not work Saturdays. It is,
But wouldn't we want to do that?
yeah, there's certainly value in that. That wasn't, I mean, I'm answering your question. It wasn't one of the things that we identified in that interview process. So, there's definitely value in ordinance
Well-
enforcement on Saturdays. But I've got to tell you, Mr. Tominello, at this point, you know, we're a little bit a ways from Saturday ordinance enforcement. I have confidence that the recommendation we're bringing to this board is the right one. We'll know well before 90 working days is up whether this person is the individual that we want. During that time, they're an at-will employee. But I can certainly say, relative to the four people we interviewed, this would be the individual that we found to be most cooperative. His employment history and some of the assignments, some of the references received were kind of along those lines. If you gave him this to do on Monday and you gave him this to do on Tuesday, that was the kind of personality
I'm
we
not
had.
questioning your selection at all.
Yeah,
You know, that's one of the reasons that I supported the motion.
sure.
I guess the whole thing is, you know, in my business, I run a 24/7 shop. When I hire somebody into my shop, I tell that person, you may be working days, you may be working afternoons, you may be working midnights. If that doesn't fall within your schedule, not saying it's gonna happen, but if that doesn't fall within your schedule and within your actually purview of work, you need to know that, and I need to know that, because maybe this isn't the right job for you.
Right.
So I really think that needs to be shared with the candidate.
I appreciate that. I will respectfully suggest that we had a different set of circumstances here. We advertised in excess of 6 weeks for this position, through word of mouth, through trade organizations, through advertising. We received 4 candidates, actually 3, because when we interviewed one, we found that some licenses had lapsed, but they promised that they would renew those licenses, although we didn't choose that candidate. What we were left with at the end of our interview process were 4 candidates and a choice to either make a hire from that pool of 4 or accept what we felt to be second best, and that would be to open the pool up to folks that didn't have the Public Act 54 building inspector's license. So I'm not suggesting that your logic is flawed. I agree with it. When we looked at this, when we looked at the clerical positions, if you might recall, we had in excess of 370 applicants. And we had a different opportunity and a different approach to that. With this, we had technically 3 candidates who applied that literally met the criteria we had. So when we went through that process and we said, well, this is the one we like the best, are we comfortable enough in making that hire? Or do we want to change our criteria and move to an ordinance-only position? So, again, I have confidence in this particular hire, but I admittedly, one of the things we discussed in the interview process, wasn't brought up by anyone, was, you know, Saturday work. But it is allowed within the contract. And our prior ordinance officer did Saturday enforcement on occasion.
Okay, thank you.
Any other discussion? Hearing none, we'll open up the floor for public comment.
Bill Servil, resident. A couple questions. First off, is this person a retiree from another municipality? And if so, are they going to partake of all the benefits that we offer? Or are we going to save a little money because they've already got a pension and health care from somewhere else? That's all I have.
Okay. Seeing no other public comment, we'll close the floor for public comment and move back to board comment. So to answer the resident's question, in fact, the applicant is a retiree from the city of Warren. They were employed, it appears, approximately 29 years with the city of Warren. I don't know if we have the right to ask them if they'll take benefits, but I know within the contract, we have no obligation to this hire for retiree health care. It's not an option. We no longer offer that to this hire. This person may very well be receiving full health care benefits from the employer from which they retired. In that event, instead of paying for the cost of health care, the contract does have, pre-arranged a flat fee to be paid in lieu of not taking health care. So the person is a retiree, and if they choose not to take our health care, we'd probably save about potentially up to $12,000 a year, just round numbers. Probably a little more, but just shooting from the hip. Any other questions?
Just as you mentioned, Mr. Chairman, it is a collective bargaining position, so that position is spelled out in the contract, so whatever those employees are entitled to, that's what that employee will get.
Correct.
You know, the only thing on the ordinance, and I've stressed it before, that if we're gonna have an ordinance officer, I want him to have a free hand.
Absolutely.
I don't want anybody to be calling up and somebody else, or, calling a board member and saying, this guy's bugging me and that, and telling them, forget about it. I spent 15 years in code enforcement, and the worst thing you can have is a politician interfering in code enforcement.
No question about it.
No matter what their position is, or anybody. They have a job to do. It's no different than a police officer enforcing traffic or whatever, or the criminal code. Nobody's gonna, he's gonna make an arrest, and that's it. So I just want, and I guess I'm gonna be tracking this. So I wanna make sure, and you get calls, everybody on the board has gotten calls about people that in their neighborhood, or they've seen on a road that this one's got storage here, or this one's got a mess here. And at times it's pulling teeth to try to get something done.
Absolutely. I couldn't
It's
agree
taken
more.
in the past, 3, 4 phone calls, can we get somebody out here? Can we get, let's get this taken care of, So that's all I'm gonna be looking at,
Sure. One of the things that the committee looked at was, and I think, I think it was Mr. Parak, it might have been Mr. York, but one of the things that we discussed was the fact that there's, that at least the 4 candidates that applied that qualified, none were residents, and we saw some inherent value. It's kind of difficult to, to be in that, policing role, while at the same time living in the community. It's very challenging.
Sure.
And, but I agree with you on all counts. The rules have to be applied fairly. Now, having said that, it's important to note that a lot of the ordinance enforcement has historically been conducted in this township through a complaint process. So there is a process where residents can come in and complain. And all I want to clarify is we're not saying in any way that we don't wish that to be available to residents, but we want to make sure that if a complaint is filed and a violation is identified, that it's treated just like every other.
Sure.
And I certainly agree with that. I'm sure
I
we'd
think
all
the
agree.
biggest thing is gonna be a follow-up.
Right,
No
right.
matter what, whether it's a valid complaint or not, because there are gonna be people calling on a lot of matters that are not a violation, but at least I think if that person can get an explanation, be educated rather than dictated to, then I think we're gonna move forward quite a bit.
Yep, I agree. And again, like I say, I look forward that hopefully all works out with this gentleman, and I'm inclined to believe if you have the opportunity to meet him, you'll like I say, I've just today I had a resident in who happens to work in the business and at another municipality. And as soon as I mentioned his name, the fellow lit up. He says, "Boy, this guy's a great guy. I've worked with him for several years, along the same lines, through classes, so on and so forth." So, got a lot of good expectations.
Mr. Supervisor, one more thing, we have, we're on the home run stretch here for rewriting our ordinances, and, if Mr. Sternicki comes on board, we'd like to have him participate over the next, quarter or so until we finish those as well.
Yep, and again, of course, we didn't discuss that with him. I wouldn't have seen any indication in terms of, his experience and the things that he's done, that he wouldn't be willing to do just that.
Great, thank you.
Any other discussion? Hearing none, we've got a motion by Mr. Witt with support by Mr. Tominello to extend the offer of employment for the building inspector. And I'm going to pause in that motion because we're posting that position, although we've acknowledged that it's an ordinance officer role. The building inspector is the higher classification, so we're hiring for that position per the contractor. So a motion to extend the offer of employment to Mr. Sternicki for the building inspector position, subject to a successful physical, drug test, and 90-day probationary period at the starting wage per the AFSCME contract. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, motion carries. Thank you, Board. Next on our agenda is public comments. Everyone within the public has 5 minutes to speak.
Linda Karczewski, resident. I have a couple things. I got a couple phone calls today, and one of them is they'd like to know when you're gonna open the restroom at Tucker Park. The kids are playing softball there now, and they need to go to the restroom. And kids are on a playground, it's nice out. It'd be really nice for parents to have a place besides a tree for little boys, because little girls have no place to go. So that was the other thing. The other,
I don't think I can fix that.
the other thing is the bike path that's along Ballard Road there along the spillway. I wish yous would go up there and see how bad it is. It is very dangerous. I was just up there today, and I'm there all the time, and I'm not the only one. Right, it goes literally like this in some parts. There is levels now because it looks like, you know how on a dirt road when it rains sometimes it looks like the lines come through? Well, the pavement on that bike path is broke up. Now it's worse every year. I have asked you for years to do something about that. You had one person already sue you for this. And I'm telling you, it is worse and worse now. If you don't believe me, like I said, go up there and go right from Tucker Park and go up, make a right-hand turn when you get up there, and start walking towards the spillway. And you'll see how bad it is. It is really, really bad. You're gonna have runners out there this weekend. If you don't think that's bad, take another look at it. I'm telling you, it is very bad it's bad enough riding a bike. When you're walking, sometimes you're walking like this because that's so bad. And then you're at an angle. Okay? And before you do any more paving, it would be nice to fix that part up, please. If you got the money, do it. Before you put any new pavement, fix the ones we have. The other thing is, again, I'm gonna ask you, when you made you added the bike path from Ballard Road to the spillway, how come you didn't put in right there at Ballard to the spillway? You gotta walk in the street. Again, you have a sidewalk that goes down Ballard. People want to use the bike path. Again, you have nothing. You got people come down Jefferson. When you get to Ballard, by Eddie's Drive in there, again, you're in the street because there's no sidewalk there. From the very beginning, which is probably 5, 6, when did we put that spillway in? When we first put that spillway in, we asked about that. So again, look out there. Your master plan for your bike path does not include that. I don't know why not. You look there, you can see where people's walks in the street. They're walking. It's just terrible there. Okay, those two. And I got one more phone call, and I did promise I would ask this question. They heard that the fireman's pension is almost broke. And they would like to know if that's true. And where did the money go to, if it is? Thank you. If we can't answer that today, we'd like an answer by next week, 2 weeks. Thank you. Oh, one other thing, and then I'm done. Parents, please, after last Friday, what kids rode all over the play equipment at Tucker Park is just shameful. Parents, please, watch where your kids are at night. This is not happening during the day. This is happening at night. The words that were written on that playscape is just, I was embarrassed when I saw it. The people that live along Ballard Road, the side streets, if you go down there, you see anybody in that park when it's closed, call the police. Let them handle it. They have a reason to be there, which they didn't, because that park should be closed at night, which we have an ordinance. You used to have a sign up there. Maybe we should put that sign back up there, and then the police have some reason to keep those kids out of that park.
Yeah, they don't need a sign.
It's bad, and your maintenance man had a very hard time trying to clean it. And parents, watch where your kids are. Keep them home.
Bill Servil, resident. I'd like to talk about the road, the $8,000 again. I still feel that this is back asswards. The drainage needs to be addressed first, and you're talking millions of dollars. And you made a comment, Mr. Verkest, that you could talk to Mr. Hoffner and maybe Band-Aid a road and it would last 5 years. If you do it right, it'd last 25. If we had proper drainage, the roads would quit deteriorating, because the frost lift the road in the wintertime. And in the springtime, people drive down there, even though there's frost laws on, they're still too heavy. The garbage trucks are still too heavy. They're damaging all of those asphalt roads. We spent $100,000, well, we spent $50,000, the county spent $50,000 just to clean out half of one of our 7 county drains. If you extrapolate that, we're talking about $4 million maybe just to clean the drains before you start getting to the road ditches. And without cleaning those drains, there's nothing you can do with the road ditches. And about 10 years ago, I believe it may have been, there was someone, when they were redoing the FEMA map for floodplain, there was someone that was willing to do an elevation certificate for each lot, which is required if you're gonna do a drainage study, for about $25,000. It's probably double that now, but you can get surveyors if you give the whole township. And we need to get into the 21st century. As we speak, there's people putting in new culverts for their driveways, and the county still does it the same way they did when I started building houses 40 years ago. And that's, they tell you to put it between the 2 that are there already. And the 2 that are there already are not right. We need to assign an elevation for every culvert that goes in. But furthermore, I'd say Mr. Tominello lives in Urine Point sub, where they put positive drainage in the whole sub. I'd recommend that, even though that's more expensive, the county always likes enclosed drains. Because what happens is people go and they do landscaping, no matter what your best plans are. They dig the ditch out, the people the next day go buy sod and put it in there. Now you're up 3 inches and the water doesn't drain properly anymore. That's all I have to say about that. Now I have a question. This is a third of the year gone by. Fire department's contract ends at the end of this year. When are you gonna start negotiating? Or are you gonna give them a free ride for an extra year on the old contract again, like we did last time? Thank you.
Thank you.
Bill Mandeville, resident, South River Road. I'm here tonight to address you on the issue of excessive noise in the form of loud music. Music from the Cruise Inn on North River Road performed by various musicians for the enjoyment of customers of the restaurant. This music is so loud that it imposes on the peace and quiet of the neighborhood. The owner regularly allows the noise to go past the 11 p.m. time as set by the Harrison Township Noise Ordinance. Not because he doesn't know the code, because the enforcement officer last year told me that she sent a copy to him, but because the longer that he can have his music outdoors, the more drinks he sells on his patio and the more money he makes. He does this on many Thursdays, most Fridays, and Saturdays. Sometimes it's so loud that I can hear it in my house with the windows closed, the air conditioning on, while I'm watching TV. I have called the restaurant and the police. The police do their job and tell him to stop, and he does while they are there. However, on more than one occasion, a short while later, the noise starts up again. Harrison Township Ordinance has a 50-foot limit on music that can be heard from a car. I don't know if it applies in this situation, but if it did apply to this situation, it would go a long ways towards solving my objection to this noise. I live over 1,000 feet from the restaurant. That's 3 football stadiums away. Yet I am an unwilling participant in the restaurant's music every weekend. The EPA has set a 55 decibel limit as safe noise level. Normal speech is 60 decibels. Now, I don't have a decibel meter, but I do know that during the day, I cannot hear the customers on the patio deck of the Cruise Inn when they are talking in a normal voice. I can, however, hear the music on the weekend nights. Continuous exposure to excessive noise can cause a range of health problems, from just being annoyed and fatigued to aggression to a reduced immune response, heart disease, that one surprised me, and my personal favorite is sleep deprivation. As a business owner in Harrison Township, I had to abide by the rules and plant a green belt to shield the view of my property and screen the lights so that they did not bother the residents in the area. Now, how is it that the Cruise Inn has just because the Cruise Inn has an entertainment license, that it can entertain the entire river and no one seems to be able to do anything about it? Entertainment should be for the purpose of those who choose to participate, those who can come and go as they please, an option that is not available to the area residents. Stricter enforcement of the ordinances that are on the books and fines imposed as needed or allowed for by the ordinance could resolve this issue. But let me be clear here. What I am looking for is a solution that allows the neighbors of the Cruise Inn to enjoy peace and quiet in and around our own homes. I ask for and need your help to resolve this matter for the good of the community. Thank you.
Thank you. Seeing no other public comment, we'll close the floor for public comment. Move back to board comment. I'll try to address some of the issues. First resident had asked about the restroom at Tucker Park. Historically, by now, we have been able to turn the water onto our parks. As some folks may know, we've got some pretty cool nights, and some of those have been below freezing. Some of the facilities that we have are not heated, and so we are a little behind in when we would normally have the restroom facilities open at Tucker Park and, of course, Waterfront Park. I just sent correspondence to the folks within the township to see if we can get those open this week. I think we've kind of outlasted the majority of the cold spells, but for certain, it has been a chillier spring than normal. The bike path on the spillway is definitely an area of our infrastructure that needs attention. It's important for our residents to know, and really the residents of Macomb County to know, that the Macomb County Public Works Office has been working for approximately 2 years between applying for the grants and assembling the funding. Some of you may remember that they went through a $500,000 assessment on the spillway, and we were levied a portion. That levy ran all the way up into Oakland County because the Clinton River watershed is a pretty broad-based and large watershed. A significant portion of that $500,000 was match dollars for a grant to fund engineering. A study's been completed on what we might, in essence, call establishing a suburban waterway park. Really the first of its kind, something unique in other words, not really a duplicate of other existing parks, but enhancing the area that compromises that makes up the spillway from Jefferson, or really from Lake St. Clair, all the way up to into Mount Clemens, or toward Mount Clemens. There's plans available online at, there's a link I know on the Macomb County Public Works Office. I want to say it's ClintonRiverSpillwayInfo.net, I believe. They've got some concepts available. I saw some preliminary examples of more detailed engineering. The plan is, well, I guess we'll say threefold. One is to improve water quality and wildlife habitat. So the banks of the spillway, when it was engineered in the 40s and 50s and constructed, was really with one goal in mind, and that was to reduce the flooding as a result of high rain events and the backup of the flow of the Clinton River through Mount Clemens. Most of us would have been underwater several times in the last few weeks in our homes, and I'm not talking about the mortgage, I'm talking about literally. The spillway alleviated a lot of what was historical flooding for the township. But when that was engineered, considerations for environment were different, 70 years ago, 60 years ago. So no one considered what the shape of those banks should be to prevent a couple of things: erosion of the banks and filling in of the lake at its mouth, and second of all, fish habitat. They did an assessment of all the wildlife that lives, all the fish, all the species. They did it a couple times throughout the cycle. What they established is that one part of improving the spillway would be to reshape the banks of the spillway to reduce the amount of erosion that occurs on the banks, and then second of all, to establish certain areas that are, for lack of a better word, floodplains or diverted areas where the water where a rapid flow of the water doesn't result in erosion of any fish spawning. Things that are certainly outside of my pay grade, biologists, so on and so forth. But definitely a lot of research that they did. That's one aspect. Another aspect is park settings, enhancing the use of the spillway on the banks for bicyclists, bike paths, multi-use paths. And then the third would be access for primarily sport fishing. They said, basically, there really isn't any opportunity for hunting there. So the plan includes, the preliminary design that I'd seen includes some access points for fishing along that spillway, but also reconstruction of the path, basically from Jefferson all the way to Mount Clemens. So it's important to note that there's already funding that's been identified for the reconstruction of that path. If we were to go ahead with that path, and let's say we said, all right, well, we're gonna repave it this summer. We've seen preliminary estimates that within a year or two after that, they plan on rebuilding all the banks, and they would destroy the paths that we would replace. So it would be very difficult for us to make a significant investment in improving the paths along the spillway in anticipation of grants that they're working on to rebuild not only just the paths, but a lot of the other access points and habitat along the path. So certainly we're aware of it. I am aware of that. I know other board members have talked about it. At this point, it will be difficult to make a significant investment in something that we believe Public Works Office is likely to finance. The grants that they've looked at are 100% grants. They're NOAA grants. They require no match. So if they could get those, that would be awesome.
How long before this is done?
Yeah, I'm trying to answer those questions. So at this point, we don't have a timeline. The engineering is completed. They've got topographical information, so it's more than just a concept. But in order for them to proceed, they've got to secure a grant. So they're going to go through that process of trying to acquire a grant. But they've been given some indication that they're likely to receive funding. I have not been given from them a timeline. Within less than 4 weeks, I've seen preliminary plans that we're going to be presented to the Public Works Office and commissioners. Ballard to the spillway, a master plan. It is included in the master plan. And as a matter of fact, part of this plan we've emphasized is to get a pedestrian bridge across the spillway. The Jefferson Bridge across the spillway is structurally sound and does just fine for vehicles. But as a result, we were told, I was told by the county engineer that neither of us will be around by the time that bridge needs to be replaced. So I don't know if he knows something that I don't, but I'm assuming that's a long time away. So he said, if we want to have pedestrian traffic across the spillway, and certainly it's important for our master plan, it's something that we've already contracted to have engineered, we're going to have to build a pedestrian bridge. So it is a part of our master plan. We are in negotiations and having that engineering done so that we can apply for grants to have the construction of that path. Certainly, we would not bring a pedestrian path across Spillway along Jefferson without connecting it to the rest of the path work that exists. So it is a part of our plan. At this point, though, we do not have the funding for the bridge. Some of you might recall, I think that price tag was roughly around $1 million. Total scope of the entire path project was about $3 million, and this board voted not to build that bridge. Yes, Chris?
Maybe I misinterpreted the question, but I think the question is from the entrance of Ballard
Right.
just to the spillway,
Right.
nothing to do with the bridge.
Understood. What I'm saying is as a part of putting a bridge across the spillway, we would certainly want to connect that path to the other existing sidewalks.
Okay.
So it's not something we're opposed to. The resident made the point that it wasn't a part of the master plan. In fact, we do have a need and a desire to do that. At this point, that has not been included in any of the plans that we've currently funded. Another question was asked regarding the fireman's pension, and it's almost broke. The fireman's pension is not almost broke. The fireman's pension, like the township, like just about every pension plan, is underfunded. There's a process you go through of constantly looking at mortality rates, looking at interest rates, making projections, smoothing. There's a lot that goes into it. But certainly no small part of what several pension plans experienced was, and I'm not an investment guy, but I'm going to say it was, I think 2007 was our low water year when a lot of the pension plans took, 20 to 30% reductions in their funding. So 06, you may have been 100%. By 08, you may have been down to 80%. Glenn may be able to speak to that better, but I would not support the statement that the fireman's pension is almost broke. And the question was leading to it, where did it go? There hasn't been some inherent removal. In other words, there's only two places. The fireman's pension has money going in and money coming out. The firefighters put in 20% of their contribution per the contract. The township puts in 80% of that contribution per the actuarial study. The only way money comes out, or any significant money, with the exception of maybe paying an actuary to do a study, maybe thousands of dollars over the course of the year, is in pension benefits. So there's nobody tapping it, taking money out, so there's no place where the money went. I can't tell you immediately what the percent of funding is on there, if it's 70, 80, whatever it is. I don't know, Glenn, if you could speak to that.
No, I don't walk around with those numbers memorized, but two observations I have is anybody is welcome to come to the Fire Pension Board meetings. They're public. They meet throughout the year just like this board does. You can come, you can ask questions and reach comfort level. But secondarily, anybody who's interested in how either the pensions are going, they're welcome to come to my office because the pensions are audited separately from the township's books. And you're welcome to a copy. I get extra copies every year if you want a copy of the audit. We're going through the audit right now, but I can give you copies of the audit reports from last year. And both pensions always get an unqualified opinion from the CPAs. So if there was even a hint of danger on the pension boards, it would come out in those reports, and they don't.
Unqualified being the best possible answer or best possible rating or analysis of a plan.
Right.
Yep. So I wouldn't say they're almost broke, but certainly both the employee pension plan, the general employee pension plan, and the firefighters pension plan have at some point in our history been fully funded, but they are not fully funded. I would say I think Macomb County is one of the few plans that I'm aware of that is 100% funded. Certainly, our pension plans are in better shape than many of our neighbors, but possibly not in as good a shape as somebody else's plan. So they are not 100% funded. But the township has never been delinquent in making a contribution, nor have they taken any funds or encumbered any of those funds per law. Resident asked about the study relative to the roads. The numbers on the 5 versus 25 life of the road, those aren't my numbers. The chief highway engineer for the county of Macomb merely pointed out to the folks within the townships that had met last Friday that one of the things they grapple with is whether or not you can come in and put a skin on the road so that you extend its life by a short amount, or whether you make the deeper and more significant investments. But his indication, the number he quoted was 25 years. He may have just been speaking offhand. Point being that, one of the things we want to look at is just exactly what level of funding and where's that return on the investment. Cleaning out the drains and ditches. In fact, we hope to discuss that in the plan, so we hope to take a look at that. But specific to engineering the road drains, we cannot impose that. That responsibility falls on the Department of Roads. Now, we can work with them, we can ask for permission, but the township does not have the ability or responsibility to shoot road drains and make the county do them. We can, levy a millage, and if we said we got a bunch of money, I'm sure they'd be happy to do the work at zero input from them, but we can't force them. The road drains are within that right of way. They do fall within the jurisdiction of the Department of Roads. And the county drains are really the public works. We've partnered with both agencies to assist financially to get some of that work done. I might take exception with the statement that enclosed drains are preferred. Certainly, there are times when that's preferred for some purposes, but actually, through our water quality initiatives and through the, some of the things that we have to do, in fact, open drains are preferred in many ways as it pertains to collecting, to improving the quality of water that finally reaches the lake or the river. They have greater holding capacity. They slow down the water. They allow for precipitation of some of the impurities. But certainly as it pertains to maintenance, filling in, have folks come in and put something right in the middle, yeah, it's pretty tough to fill in an underground drain with grass growing over it as opposed to an open drain. So there's certainly preferences, advantages to both. Fire contract and negotiating. We've had some discussions, and as a matter of fact, I actually proposed some initial dates. Once I got there, I realized that we hadn't had a final number from our assessor until last month, establishing just what the property value for 2014 will be for the entire township. So in essence, what I told the firefighters is that there's very little value in sitting down to negotiate when we don't know what funds are available. Last week, Mr. Spencer provided me, he's gone through the budget with Chief Lopez from the fire department. They've kind of established what numbers they see. He's given us some preliminary numbers for revenue, and now we have numbers to take a look at what 2014 looks like and what some of the goals might be in the negotiating. Certainly there is zero interest on my part, and I'm sure the board feels the same, about any extension of that contract and moving forward without having a contract in place. Last comment from a resident was a request, I guess I say a report on the concerns regarding noise, and several comments very well stated. I believe that issue is a function of enforcement, and I've said to the resident before, but it's a function of calling the police. It's a function of calling. I've given the resident my number. You can call me at 11:01. I'll go over there and talk to that guy. Make it my problem. It'll irritate me on a Saturday. Unfortunately, it's not something that I witness personally based on where my home is located. But I would not condone noise, I guess you'd say, beyond the 11 p.m. curfew as it's ordered within our ordinance. I don't blame the resident for frustration when it exceeds that time. And I'm again, I don't want to speak for every board member, but I'm sure we all agree that if at 11 it doesn't stop, we want to know it, we want to address it, we want to meet with that property owner. We have a process through ordinance where we initially look for compliance. So, typically a warning precedes a ticket, precedes a higher level ticket and court appearances. But if they're not following the rules, you got to let us know, let the cops know. I'm happy to call them on Monday. If you don't want to call me on a Saturday and you say they were at it again, I'll talk to the guy, I'll talk to the deputies. 11 o'clock is the curfew, that's the ordinance. If they don't follow it, we've got to enforce it. And I'll definitely stand behind that 100%. So, those are the only comments I had. I don't know if any other board members have anything. I try to keep them
Has
brief.
anybody been out there, from the township to address to talk to these people already?
Sheriff's deputy has.
Just the deputies, have they,
far as I
so how many occasions? Yeah, anybody, to me, if there's been talk already, the time for talk is done.
Right.
You issue an ordinance complaint and let the steps move forward, because we can talk to people and talk to people and talk to people, and they're gonna do what they want until they're, a judge tells them, you can't do this, you're violating an ordinance, and yes, it is in our ordinance, what the gentleman stated about the times and the decibels and the distances. All of that is spelled out specifically.
Right.
So it's, I guess that's one of the things, like Larry mentioned earlier, when you've got a problem, and that's what, if we're gonna get an ordinance officer, I guess whenever he's hired, let him know right off the bat that we've got a problem there,
Right.
you know? and-
Absolutely, agreed. And the thing is the process that we go through, again, as I mentioned, through warnings, tickets, and then ultimately it ends up in a court appearance. That's where we want that, and that was certainly one of the areas where we did, through the interview process, try to identify whether or not these candidates were strong in that support in the court, to work with a prosecutor, to get the problem solved. And I agree, if that's the case, and we've got existing complaints, we notify the deputies, we, hook them up with the ordinance officer, and we get tickets written. Any other comments, or, no? Consumers? I don't think so. Hearing none, I'd be, looking for a motion to adjourn.
So moved, Mr. Chair.
Is there support?
Support.
Got a motion with support to adjourn at 8:34. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, motion carries. Thank you, board.